Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another workplace initiative. And this week we're talking education. So we have a special guest, Melanie Smith, who I'm going to introduce you to. Right now, you can see her with all the beautiful plants behind her. But I'm going to let her introduce herself. I'm Victoria, the Teen Services Librarian here at the Iowa City Public Library. And I'm going to pass it over to Melanie so that she can describe who she is and what she does.
Sure. Well, as Victoria said, I'm Melanie. I am currently the building sub at Kennedy High School. And next year, so in the fall, I will be an LA teacher at Central City for 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. So, yeah.
And I'm sure everybody who's a student knows what LA means, but
Oh.
for anybody else that might not know, for parents, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's language arts. That's not an uncommon thing for like, what is LA? What does that mean? Language arts, English, same thing.
Perfect. All right. So I know that you have an extensive background, just personally from knowing you. But what kind of education do you need to get into education? And for students who are still in high school right now, what can they do to get a jump start, or are there any classes that they could take to help, fill some of those requirements early on?
Yeah, so I went to Kirkwood for 2 years because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And then I went to the University of Iowa, they have a very good education program. And so I went through their program, and that took me about 5 years. So just be prepared. It might take some people less time or more time. And so to my knowledge, there's not any classes that you can take at the high school level, but you can always be a TA, which is like a teacher's assistant. And sorry, a teacher's assistant, and that's just helping the teacher in the classroom. And then you can help the teacher either by grading homework or making copies or something like that. I know you can also volunteer after you get done with high school, and volunteer for working in the schools as well. But yeah, a lot of it is just during college, they'll do an observation where you go to a high school and you observe a teacher teaching, and then I think that's just for a couple weeks, and then at the end of that time you can teach your own lesson. Kind of scary, but it's really good experience to feel out if it's something that you like to do before going further in the program. And then at the end of the program you have your student teaching, which is a whole semester where you start with 0 classes, you go up to the full amount of classes, and then you go right back down to 0. So like, they don't just like wham bam you straight in there. You have to teach everything, and your cooperating teacher that you work with is usually really good about helping you. So yeah.
And so say, for example, you wanted to be a high school teacher, but you weren't quite sure, like, do you want to teach science? Do you want to teach math? When does all that come about? When do you do your 2 years of general, and then when you're doing teacher ed, is that when you start to do the science type things?
So you have to know what you want to teach at the beginning of getting into the education program, at least at Iowa. You had to have so many credits in that subject area before you were even admitted into the education program. So for me, I did Japanese as my content area. I also later added on English so that I could teach both. And it's very common to have 2 areas of study. So for example, ELL for English language learners, and just regular language arts English. They go hand in hand. There's a lot of common classes that you can take, but people can do like science and math. It's really up to you, but you do have to have at least so many credits with one subject area before you can get into the education program.
Sure. And since you have been, you've been the person who is, you know, the building, is it supervisor? And then
Building sub.
the building sub, and then, you know, a substitute teacher too. Like, can you talk a little bit about that? Can people get experience that way before they actually think about going into teaching, or do they do
Yes.
that, you know, in lieu of teaching, or both?
Yeah, no, that's great. I highly recommend, if you are unsure, you can get your substitute license without any teaching background. There are some courses to take through, I think it's the Grant Wood AEA, that facilitates all of that. But yeah, you can be a substitute, and I was a substitute before I was a building sub. And as a substitute, you can kind of feel out all of the different grade levels. So you can see, do I like younger kids? Do I maybe prefer older kids? Because some people really don't want to do like the younger grades, and that's totally fine. There's something for everybody. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you feel like you found your niche, you found your age. Do you have any idea what a day in the life is going to look like once you get in the job? Like, how many
Yeah.
classes are you going to teach a day and those kind of things?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, each school is different. So for example, I was a long-term sub this past fall. And so I did that for a woman who had a baby at the beginning of the school year. Obviously, this last year was a little bit different with the pandemic and everything. But you would get to school probably an hour before school starts and make sure you're all ready for the day. Kennedy moved to a block schedule. So that meant only 4 classes in a day that were an hour and a half long. But some schools like Central City will have 7 or 8 classes in a day.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on the school. So for my upcoming year, I will actually have block classes at the beginning and regular classes in the afternoon. So I will teach 7th and 8th graders together in the same classroom, just because it's a smaller school. And they actually go through a 2-year program. So 7th and 8th will be a 2-year program for them to complete. And then I'll have lunch. So at Central City, it's an hour lunch. And kids can also during that time come and see teachers if they need extra help. So that's also something that's unique to Central City. And then in the afternoon, it's just hourly classes for the afternoon. So I will have 9th graders, and then I think I will also have an independent reading course as well. And that is for students who are struggling a little bit in language arts and they just need an extra credit to get through. So yeah, it'll be nice variety.
You're going to be busy.
Yes.
even maybe through your lunch hour. So
for sure.
Take something quick.
Yeah.
So I know it's a little bit different because you've been subbing and you've been doing, you know, I mean, you have been kind of teaching long term, so you do kind of have an idea. Would you say that it's easy to be able to just switch off at the end of the day, or do you feel like you're carrying some of that work home with you and your work's not ever quite done?
As a teacher, I've heard that it's hard to leave school at school. I know some teachers take a lot of their work home with them, especially this past year where everything was all online. It was super easy to just, you know, have it at home all the time. But one thing that I would recommend is to turn off email notifications on your phone. That is one easy way to make sure that the school stays at school. Because I know parents and students sometimes think that since they can contact you via email, you are available 24/7. So you just have to make sure that you set that boundary, and if they get mad, it's not your fault. So just something to remember, that they need to be aware of your personal space as well.
Yeah, so set your boundaries.
Yes.
So what do you think, as a new teacher or even a student teacher, what do you think might be some things that are surprising, or things that maybe new teachers wouldn't expect, either for the best, or maybe not?
So something that I found to love is that sometimes the most difficult students are your favorite students.
Oh.
Yeah, so last year I was a building sub as well, and I helped out a lot with study hall. And of course, not everybody wants to sit at study hall for that length of time. So the kids that didn't want to sit and do homework would mess around, go wander the halls or something. And so instead of them doing that, I would strike up a conversation with them and get to know them. And through that interaction, they would see me in the halls and they say, "Hey, Miss Smith," and it was just so great. And so you earn a level of respect, getting to know the kids, that maybe you wouldn't get if you were just lecturing the whole time, or
Right.
here's the rules, you know, you gotta stick to them. But yeah, getting to know the kids that might be a little bit more difficult was one of the pleasures for me. And something that was a little bit more difficult was dealing with parents. They, yes, love parents, and I know that they want the best for their kids, and sometimes that's a little bit too much at times. So dealing with the parents, the adults, so to speak, kind of make it a little difficult. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Right. I got you there. So when you're thinking about, somebody that wants to go into education, what kind of traits do you think would make a good teacher?
Yeah. So back when I was in high school, I was the shy kid. I didn't want to talk in front of everybody. I didn't have a whole lot of friends. Knowing me
That does
now,
not sound like you at all.
I know. So knowing me now, that's not what people would imagine.
Right.
And so obviously people change over time, but once you kind of get a sense of yourself, being comfortable with who you are is a big thing. And being able to share your quirkiness, and obviously all of my quirks are on display, and then students were able to see that. And you can't really see, but I have a gnome here in the back.
Oh yeah, now you say that, I can see the gnome. Very cute.
And one of the things, all of the classes, they had a different name that they called my gnome. So the most common was Gerald.
Oh wow.
But making sure that you are comfortable with yourself and sharing who you are will make kids be more comfortable in the classroom, and that's something that you really, really want. So being comfortable with yourself, being able to talk in front of others and not feel like they're attacking you is a big thing, because they're still trying to figure out who they are, and they might say things wrong and all that. So that, and then having a lot of patience.
Yes. So having a thick skin and having some patience.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think about librarianship, and I think, a lot of librarians were traditionally women. What do you see in the workforce now with teachers? Do you think it's getting more and more, males are coming into the field, or do you think it's still predominantly women?
I think it depends on the subject area, honestly. If it's math, it's about 50-50. Science is about the same, but history is really male dominated, which is totally fine. But language arts, it's a lot of women.
Yeah.
So, yep.
It's funny how that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think for foreign language, it's also more women as well, but there's I'd say about 60-40 for that. So yeah.
I know obviously the pandemic has probably changed things, but either before or afterwards, the prospects are for teachers? And, when you got out of school, did you feel like you had to look kind of far and wide to get jobs? Or did you feel like if you wanted to stay in Iowa, you could stay in Iowa and get a job?
Yeah, so, so that's a good question. So for language arts, there's a there's a lot of people that go for language arts
Mhm,
degrees. So that makes it a little bit harder
mhm,
to find a job that maybe is like 100% a fit for you.
mhm.
Um, Whereas when I was hanging out in one of the math teachers' rooms, they had a student teacher and she said she already had a job lined up.
Oh,
So she had one right out of the gate.
right.
Um, so it really depends on if you're open to something that's not 100% what you may want.
Mhm,
And you just have to remember that you can always go to a different school the following year because there will always be openings. So
mhm. Okay.
sometimes you just have to play the long game.
Right, 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 right. Big picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so when I think about other organizations, and sometimes you can kind of see a level of promotion and things like that. Once you're an entry level teacher, what does it look like to get promoted, or get further education to make more money, or be more competitive?
Yeah. So when I applied at Central City, after the interview, one of the first things that they sent me was the pay scale.
Hmm.
They're like, here it all is. Here's what it is when you have 0 years of experience,
Hmm.
1 year, all the way up to, I think it was like 50 years or something like
Oh,
that. So
wow.
they lay it out for you. And
Hmm.
since it's unionized, it's even across the board, um, which is nice
Hmm.
to see it all laid out. And with teaching, every so many years to keep your license, you have to take classes.
Hmm.
So for example, every 5 years, you have to take 5 credits worth of classes. And that can be through university or free through Grant Wood, but 5 credits is needed for every 5 years, for example. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And hi, Kitty. Yes. um, and the more credits that you take, the
Mhm,
more money that you will make. That was also on there. And so if you have X amount of credits, then you will get this amount of money. And then if you have a master's degree, you'll get this amount of money. Um, and then also this past year, I helped out with the Plain Brown Wrapper at Kennedy, which is their literary magazine.
mm.
And you get a good amount of money for helping out with that.
Oh,
So
wow.
once I'm at Central City, I'm going to be helping out with the journalism. So that's like the yearbook, and they also
Hmm.
offer money for helping out with that as well.
Sure.
So and if you're a coach, I know they also pay money for that. So there's lots of
Hmm.
different ways to earn more money.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm always blown away. We have some student newspapers in Iowa City, and they're so good.
Yeah,
Like the reporters and the photographers, and just the content. It's amazing.
yeah,
It's so good.
yeah. Students are really in tune nowadays, I feel.
Hmm.
And they really dig deep and bring out the emotion in a lot
Right.
of their
And
stories.
they're tech savvy, and they've got it all.
Yeah,
It's
they
great.
really do.
It's so great. um, would you say, maybe not even in education, but I always think of, young people who maybe haven't had any relatives, or, people that they've known who've gone to college. Would you say that you had any kind of mentorship, or do you think it's important for young students who are thinking about college or going into, a certain field, to try and seek out either professionals in that field, or just other people to help them network and kind of get along?
I would say knowing people in your line of work is huge nowadays.
Hmm.
And even so, you have the education field, but even like my sisters, One is a musician in New York, one is an artist in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And they say your contacts and who you know is everything nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have the best degree in the world, but if you don't know anybody, unfortunately, nobody's going to hire you.
Right.
So make sure that you are volunteering, putting yourself out there, getting to know people, and that will help a lot for sure. Yeah. At least for me, for my interview at Central City, I had 4 different people contact the school before I even had an interview.
Oh,
Because
wow.
they were like, hey, there's this girl, she's really awesome, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever words they said.
They must have been good.
It must have been good, because the principal who was interviewing me, he's like, yeah, I already got lots of people saying I need to hire you. And I
Oh,
was like, that's really sweet and really
yes.
awesome. So
Right.
yeah, the more people you know,
Mm-hmm.
recommendations is really helpful.
Yep. That's awesome. I always have this image in my mind of, like, teachers really working hard, and then summer comes and then they just go on holiday for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or the whole summer. What happens in the summertime for teachers?
So there's the option to teach summer school,
Okay.
especially this year with it being so difficult for
Mm-hmm.
students to really get a grasp on things. That's going to be huge. There's also trainings and meetings, and like I said, for those 5 years and 5 credits, summer's a great time to take educational courses.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, I know school gets out on the 4th for Kennedy, and I think for the week after there is some professional learning.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, and I think about a month, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before school starts again in August, there's going to be more professional learning on bringing everybody up to speed on maybe some new technology, different ways of teaching. Here's your new textbooks. Maybe there's things that need to go in the classrooms. So there are, sometimes off for teachers. So don't be afraid, like you're going to work all the time, but it's not just 3 months of vacation.
Right. You mentioned technology there, and I know that, everybody's jobs have been impacted somehow with technology. How technologically savvy would you say a teacher has to be, and how much does technology play a role in their day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, this last year was not typical.
Right.
And a lot of teachers struggled if they were paper and pencil teachers, getting everything online. But all of the students at Kennedy, all of the students at Central City, they all have laptops. Everybody's got one now.
Right.
And as a teacher, you are given one as well to use. And there are a lot of really good resources of putting things online for kids, especially if they weren't there that day. They can catch up. They don't have to ask you, that sort of thing. I think technology is really useful, and the University of Iowa was really good about saying, hey, here are some things that you need to use, and I want you to create a lesson using XYZ. So you do get some practice with technology before you hit the classroom, and also when you're doing your student teaching, that's another thing. Something that is prevalent in the classroom today is smart boards. Yeah, so, and that was not around when I was in high school.
Right.
So if you are unfamiliar with those things, I would perhaps be a substitute first, or maybe even just go to your local high school and say, hey, I'm thinking about becoming a teacher. Can I, shadow a teacher for a day or two and have them maybe show me the ropes or something?
Right.
Anything to kind of figure out if it might be a little too much for you, because I know some schools do use a lot of technology and some schools do not. So yeah.
One thing I wondered about, and I wonder if it's like just a course or something, but in the library we have library use policies, or just things that we might want patrons or our community to, adhere to, rules and things. Are you taught how to, I mean, you probably taught classroom management, but what about, what are some things that are okay to say to students, and maybe the language that you use, is that a big part of what you're doing?
So at Kennedy, I know they had a lot of professional development on Fridays, because Fridays were half days.
Mhm.
Half days, you get out at 1:30 instead of 3.
Right.
And so that extra hour and a half is used. We had equity meetings, and we would have people come in and kind of verse us on how to act, what we should say, what we shouldn't say. Here are, resources, here's the history behind it. But then I had to teach Of Mice and Men, and it has the N word in it.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of kids didn't know anything about that. And I wanted to make sure that before we even got into that we covered it, and they weren't surprised by it. They knew the meaning behind it, why we don't use that now. And so I actually reached out to a couple of the other teachers, and I'm like, what do you do? So reaching out to other teachers for ideas and resources and just help is really, really nice. And even as I'm leaving Kennedy, a lot of the teachers are like, if you ever need any assistance on anything, let me know, because I've been there. So I want to help.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. That was something else that I wondered, because obviously you have to teach Common Core or, some kind of curriculum, but are you allowed to pick your own books, or are you given a list and you can choose from them?
That's a good question, because it's different depending on the school, I found.
Okay.
The Cedar Rapids Community School District all has the same things that you need to teach. You can teach additional things, but these things should be included. So for example, there was a question that should be the main theme, like what are sorry, my cat and my dog are in the same room. Like, what builds your childhood dream? How does that transition into something that fuels your imagination and your dreams as an adult? Okay, you need to just go. Yeah.
That sound is very familiar in my house too. Impending fight.
Yes. So there's the common question that is the theme. And then there were 4 different texts that go along with that theme. And it was maybe an essay, a novel, an audio file, and a poem. So they weren't like all really long things, and they all went with a theme, and then you could kind of build off of that, which was great as a first-time teacher. Yeah, I found that super helpful. And there are standards that you teach to. Surprise, cat number 2.
They're taking it in turns.
So there are standards that you teach to, and they kind of guide you to, okay, we want the students to be able to write an essay, for example, by the end of the school year. You're like, cool, I want to be able to do that, and I'm going to use XYZ. So Kennedy is very structured in that way, whereas I found at Central City, it's a lot freer. You can kind of create whatever you want. You can use whatever books you want. So I am super excited about.
Oh, wow.
That.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The principal is very much whatever you want, I'm going to get it for you. Let's do this.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's very exciting.
Yes, the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
That's scary too, though.
It is a little bit scary because you're like, so much beat up. But then you're no, focus.
Melanie assigns 8 texts for the next semester. Oh my goodness.
All right, we're gonna pause real quick. I'm gonna let my dog outside.
Sure. Yep. Okay, last question. What advice would you give to young people looking to get into your field?
That it's totally okay to be nervous. All the time. Totally okay. Totally normal to be nervous. And that to remember that when you're teaching, that no one but you knows what the lesson plan is.
Mm-hmm.
So if things aren't going according to plan, it's totally okay to throw the plan out the window and just go with whatever needs to be taught that day. So for example, if you're like, okay, I'm going to be teaching of mice and men today, but then a student comes in, you can see that they're not really having the best day, and it seems like we need to do something else so that we can have a better start the next day. And you just chuck it out the window and wait for tomorrow. Or they might have a better day in it. It would be a better time to start that. And that's totally fine. And usually when you chuck the plan out the window, those are the best days for teaching anyways. So yeah, it's more important than whatever lesson you were going to teach them anyways, if you are connecting to the students instead.
Right.
So
Yeah, I feel like teachers kind of have that reputation like librarians do, where you feel like you need to know everything all the time. You have to be the master of your domain. And, of course you can't know everything.
Yeah.
A willingness to be able to adapt or, find out the answer if you don't know it. I know for me, it's difficult to feel like you know enough about something. Like you're supposed to be the guardian of the galaxy or something for knowledge, So I feel like teachers are held to that high esteem too, like you need to know, like, do you use the Oxford comma there, or I mean, and I'm sure you would know the answer to that, but
depends on the sentence.
right. So no, I wish you all the luck with your new job, and you're going to be amazing. And I'm hoping that some people who are in our community who want to, think about teaching, we have some contacts, and so
Perfect.
I definitely encourage them to get a hold of me, and I will get a hold of people like you, and we will answer some of the questions if I don't know the answers. But thank you so much, Melanie, for being here.
My pleasure. Anytime.